My friends, today I prepared a full free guitar technique course especially for you that will take you through the most important picking technique topics all the way to the best and most helpful fretting hand tips, and on top of that I will also show you some of the best exercises that you can implement in your daily practice routines. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, what you will see in this free course is just a very small preview of what awaits you inside my actual premium guitar courses on patreon.com/burned. That's my online guitar academy, because my students over there have access to my 12 premium guitar technique courses, 5 really awesome music theory courses, and even 4 home recording courses. These are simple to follow step-by-step programs that take you from the fundamentals of technique and theory all the way to your biggest guitar goals. So if you're a self-taught player, no one ever told you how to really hold a pick, how to make a professional practice routine, this is exactly what you've been looking for all this time. I'd love to welcome you inside of my online guitar academy of Patreon, but for now let's start with the first topic, 10 really awesome technique hacks all guitarists should know. Alright my friends, let's talk about guitar technique today. In this video I'd like to show you 10 guitar technique life hacks. These guitar technique adjustments brought me pretty life-changing results in the last couple of years. So let's go through all of them step by step right now, because I'm quite sure that they will make your life much easier from now on and your guitar skills much better in just 10 minutes. So here are the main 2 technique tricks you can apply to get rid of that annoying string noise forever. So when we play a scale position like this, we often tend to move away the last finger like that. It's almost an instinct to remove your fingers from the fretboard when you're done playing on one string and transition to the next string. But you actually don't have to perform big movements like that when you're done playing on one string. As you can see, my movements are very small and relaxed, especially when I'm playing fast, so you don't see that kind of pull-off motion when I transition to the next string. And another technique trick when I'm performing scale runs like this is how I position my index finger on the next string. I'm slightly touching the D string right here, although I'm playing on the G string. So even if there would be some kind of unwanted pull-off motion or something like that, the D string is actually slightly muted because I'm touching it with my index finger. So that also really helps me with avoiding that unwanted noise when it comes to string changes. And the second technique trick is the one that fixed the issue for me once and for all. This one is about making sure that you're not touching the strings with your fingers or knuckles as you're playing. So when I'm playing like this and my fingers are rubbing against the strings, you can hear a lot of string noise, and it's also actually starting to hurt already. But that's actually how I used to play not so long ago. So I always needed a fret wrap or a string dampener or just a sock in order to record clean guitar takes with high distortion. But now, since I made sure that my fingers and knuckles are not touching the strings when I'm playing, I don't have any muting problems anymore and I don't need a fret wrap anymore. The second technique trick is extremely helpful for all players that feel like they don't get consistent results out of their picking motion. So maybe you feel like you can play very fast and controlled on one day, but then on the next day your technique and motion completely falls apart at certain BPM steps. And here's how I personally solved this mystery concerning my technique. As we discussed in previous videos, I prefer playing with a closed hand. If you missed out on all the benefits of this technique approach and the before and after comparison when I switched from open hand to closed hand, subscribe to the channel right now, because I'm posting videos like this one every single week. That way you won't miss important technique information like that anymore. This will save you tons of wasted practice hours, and it might just change your guitar journey and life forever. That's what this is all about. But what I actually want to show you today is that I got much better and more controlled results with my picking technique as soon as I stopped moving the individual fingers and joints when I was picking. So when I started playing and getting into alternate picking, it looked like this. So when I started out, there was a lot of movement going on with my thumb, but also with my index finger. And that was the main reason for me why I got good picking results on one day and bad picking results on the next one. There was simply no real system or method behind this kind of picking madness. And when you're playing that way, you can't really expect the same results with every practice session, gig or recording job. So I instantly got much better and more controlled results with stiff picking hand fingers like that. When I'm playing, I'm not making a fist like that and I'm not tensing up. I'm really just closing my hand like this. That also means that I can kind of support my index finger with the other fingers. I'm not just playing like this. And since I got rid of that index finger and thumb movement, I got much better and more consistent results even with this big wide pick. I usually play much smaller Jazz 3 size picks, but I think you can see all the movements and details a bit better with this one. That's why I'm using it in this video. Here's an awesome picking exercise for you that you can practice to work on this. This one is especially great when it comes to avoiding all that unnecessary finger movement. If you want to try the closed hand approach, try to support your index finger with your other fingers like this, and try not to move your index finger and thumb like this. As always, you can find all your practice files like the backing tracks, the exercise video play-alongs, the PDF tabs and guitar profiles on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Bernd. All members over there also have access to my most recent full online guitar courses and also to my personal feedback, of course, in case you feel like you're stuck with your technique at the moment. So before we move on to fretting hand technique, I want to show you one more technique trick when it comes to your picking motion. So since the latest episode on string transitions, I got a lot of frustrated messages on Patreon. Almost all of them were about one of the most challenging string transitions, ending with an upstroke on the lower string and then having to play a downstroke on the higher string. So for example, just playing 4 chromatic notes on the G string and then the next note with a downstroke on the B string. So why is this actually so challenging? Well, you're playing 4 notes on the lower string, that's simple enough, but then you have to jump over the string that you're playing on to get to the next string, to the B string in that case. And when you start practicing this, you will always accidentally touch the G string as well. So you want this sound, but you get this sound. So one easy technique trick that has helped me with solving this problem is just thinking about it like a snapping motion that I'm performing with my picking hand. So I'm playing downstroke, upstroke, upstroke, and then the snapping motion like this. The reason for that is that it helps me to internalize that I have to perform this kind of upwards motion after the last upstroke on the G string. So right here I'm still connected to the bridge with my palm, but my pick is in the air and it's not stuck in between the strings. And I really feel this movement with my wrist even when I'm playing very fast. I feel this upwards movement and then that kind of snapping motion downwards. Here's an example of how you could actually practice this in your routine. I also made exercise video play-alongs and backing tracks in lots of different tempos on Patreon. Downloading them will help you out a lot with mastering this picking technique challenge. So what's the most important tip concerning fretting hand technique that I could possibly give you? So my personal biggest light bulb moment is that you don't need a strong grip in order to play fast. I actually work with an extremely light grip when I'm playing. And that really helps me with feeling each individual finger and with playing very fast without getting exhausted quickly, so I don't feel any pain or any kind of weird burning sensation in my wrist. But with this extremely important topic, you have to fight your brain and your instincts a little bit, because if there's a fast and challenging lick coming up in a song, you're naturally tensing up, trying to get it right, and this really stands in the way of developing good guitar technique. So in your next practice routine, it would be awesome if you would focus on how light your grip can actually be. So you're really just placing your fingers on the fretboard like this and you start playing without applying tons of pressure like this. And I promise you, you will be very surprised when you find out how light your grip can actually be. Here's a very helpful exercise concerning that you can implement in your current practice routine. This one is from a recent technique episode on the channel and it's all about feeling and relaxing all of your fingers. And of course your biggest focus is playing it with a very light grip. Alright, let's do a picking technique quick fire round, because there's still a lot of stuff I want to show you in this video. For me personally, it's very hard to pick fast and controlled with a parallel angle like this. This also makes string transitions quite difficult. So I get much better results when I tilt my pick like this at an angle. Here's a direct comparison. I will try to play with the parallel angle now. So this was very difficult for me, and that makes it hard for me personally to develop speed, and I also tend to touch the other strings when I play this way, so there's a lot of string noise. And here's what happens when I angle the pick like this. So I suddenly feel like I'm gliding across the strings and the transitions become very easy for me. That really made a huge difference for me a couple of years ago. Now here's the next picking technique trick, and this one concerns the movement of the pick in general. So when I'm playing with this picking angle that I just showed you, I actually try to feel the picking motion as an up and down movement like that. Because one picking mistake that can really slow you down is developing this kind of angular movement. So when your pick is kind of jumping back and forth like this. An angular approach like this is okay when it comes to string transitions, so that you avoid getting stuck between the strings. But when you're just playing on one string, for example, and you have this kind of movement, it's very hard to speed up your playing because there's a lot of unnecessary movement. And what really helps me with avoiding this kind of movement is imagining the motion like this and feeling the motion like this, like an up and down movement. As opposed to something like this. Yeah, that is very hard to speed up, and a lot of string noise as well. And the last picking technique trick for now concerns how much of the pick you're actually using when you're playing. So maybe you've seen this already. When I'm playing, I like to work with the tip of my pick, because if I would play like this, so with a lot of the pick sticking out, I feel like I need a lot more power, because I'm really digging in with my pick and I'm using a lot of it. And for me personally, that also makes string transitions much harder, because as you probably know by now, you don't want to get stuck in between the strings. And all of this gets much easier for me when I'm just working with the tip of my pick. Alright, let's do another quickfire round for fretting hand technique. These are the 3 most important technique tricks that you should keep in mind when it comes to your fretting hand technique skills. So what's extremely important right away, especially for legato, so for hammer-ons and pull-offs, is how the fingers are actually coming in contact with the strings. So which area of your fingertips are you actually using to play the notes on your fretboard? I mostly use the area that's close to my fingernails when I'm playing, so not the big fleshy part right here. So it mostly looks like this when I'm playing. You can see the curled angle of my fingers. I'm not playing like this. But it can also really slow you down when you're playing like this. So when you're using the big fleshy parts of your fingertips to play. This might be kind of okay for string bending and vibrato to really dig in with your fingers. But if you want fast, clean and controlled hammer-ons and pull-offs, you definitely want to make sure to work with this area of your fingertips and not with the big kind of fleshy one down here. If you're a part of our YouTube community, you might know about the next trick, but I still have to include it on this list because it's very important. Playing like this is great for expressive string bending and vibrato, but it's pretty much impossible to stretch when your thumb is placed over the neck like this. But as soon as I move it back down in the area around my middle finger, I can suddenly stretch like this, or even like that if I want to. So obviously playing something like this would be completely impossible with this kind of approach. And the final and probably most important fretting hand technique topic concerns economy of motion. We discussed this with different exercises on the channel already, but this is so important because obviously it will be very hard for you to play fast and controlled if your fingers are constantly bending away from the fretboard like this when you're playing, especially that flying pinky finger. Additional wrist movement like this, so rocking your wrist back and forth, can also be very problematic. Yeah, as you can see, that's a lot of unnecessary movement and you end up with a lot of string noise. So it's very important for me to keep my fingers as close to the fretboard as possible when I'm playing in order to play fast, clean and controlled. Much better than... I think you can hear the difference right away. So here's an awesome economy of motion exercise for your practice routine. This one is played with alternate picking to make it more challenging, and the main goal is keeping your fretting hand fingers as close to the fretboard as possible. So you're barely lifting them, and that will train your fingers to stick closely to the fretboard as you're playing, and you will see some great results with this one after a couple of practice sessions. It's a really awesome and effective exercise. Alright my friends, don't forget to get all your practice files for today's exercises on patreon.com/Bernd right now to finally take your guitar technique to a professional level over the next couple of weeks. I promise it's not tedious, it's actually a lot of fun to work on this. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on the next tips and exercises. Guitar speed. One of mankind's ancient and seemingly best kept secrets. Since I was a teenager, I'm obsessed with finding the best exercises to improve my technique because I love the sound of those high adrenaline virtuosic sections. But when I was younger and got more serious about practicing and playing guitar, I mostly got rather unhelpful feedback like that. You just have to practice. Start by playing slow and then just play faster. Just increase your metronome speed by 1 BPM every day until you reach 300 BPM. That definitely didn't help. So in today's video I'd like to show you my 5 easy steps to extreme guitar speed, including the ultimate daily guitar speed workout in step number 4. This is how I made it work, and trust me, if I can do this, you can do it as well. Let's start shredding. So when I wanted to play faster at the beginning, I didn't start with overly complex hand synchronization exercises or full guitar solos. I mainly just wanted to play riffs like that. Lots of alternate picking strokes on the low open E string. So working on that allowed me to develop a solid picking technique first before I was involving my fretting hand some more. So my first really important tip is keeping things simple when you start out and addressing one challenge at a time. This leads me right into the second and probably most important topic of this list. I was a very impatient kid. I didn't want to play the songs perfectly at a slow tempo first, I wanted to play along to the recordings right away. In hindsight, it probably sounded something like that. That does sound pretty terrible. I'm not really playing 16th notes and I'm just pushing as hard as possible to somehow keep up with the drums. But I did learn one incredibly important thing here that a lot of very analytical players miss. I got an idea of how it actually should feel like as soon as I actually reach those fast tempos. Please think of your last practice session real quick. Do you know the feeling of hitting a certain speed barrier with your exercises, for example 130 beats per minute, and no matter how hard you try, you simply can't play the exercise or lick at tempos beyond that? Of course, I didn't realize it back then, but I actually did something relatively smart as a kid. I pushed beyond my limitations and explored faster tempos early on, with very sloppy results of course. But in retrospect, I think this was a key factor of finding my fast picking motion early on. Which leads me directly to the mind-blowing step number 3. So this was one of the big light bulb moments for me. I don't remember where I actually heard this first and I'd love to give credit, so please leave a comment if you know about the original source. So have you ever thought about playing slow as walking and playing fast as running? This analogy makes a lot of sense because those motions are completely different. And you obviously will never learn how to run if you just walk a bit faster every day. If you're like me, you already tried this classic approach of just playing exercises, licks or songs 5 beats per minute faster every day until you eventually reach your dream tempo. But at one point you just hit that annoying speed barrier and you can't play faster. That's exactly when you have to transition to the running motion. Once again, please imagine just walking a bit faster every day to train for a marathon. I'm sure that at one point it will feel extremely exhausting and awkward to just walk fast because you have to start running. Then you're suddenly much faster and it also feels like the right way of doing this. You probably won't remember it, but the first time you were running as a kid, you probably fell over because it's a completely new motion and feeling that you have to get adjusted to. At least I'm quite sure that I fell over because I was a pretty clumsy kid. But at one point you just have to leave your comfort zone to learn this new skill, and it doesn't matter if you fail at the beginning. But how do you actually practice all of that? Let's check it out in step number 4.
We obviously looked at tons of really helpful exercises on the channel already, but if you're not subscribed, you probably missed the most important ones, which makes me very sad. So make sure to subscribe right now for free weekly lessons like that one. We are barely getting started on this channel, and today I'd like to invite you to become a part of this journey. So the exercise concept I would like to recommend today for building guitar speed is based on short bursts, tension and relaxation, and string pairing. This was my personal most effective speed training routine. So when I started out, I made the huge mistake of focusing on way too big scale exercises to work on my hand synchronization. And I got so much better results as soon as I started focusing on short and precise bursts like that. This way of practicing truly was a game changer for me at the beginning, because I could only focus on transitioning between two strings and on always ending with a downstroke. That way I could easily always tell if I was playing the correct amount of notes with every repetition, and my hands adjusted to that feeling over time. Aside from that, you also work with the really powerful tension and relaxation principle right here. So a quick burst of fast notes, then you rest, and then you play again. So when you practice this, it shouldn't feel like extreme tension and complete relaxation. So it's great to have a constant reference and comparison between those two states when you're practicing. You won't cramp up that easily with those added rests, and over time you will realize how small and relaxed your fast picking motion can actually be. So I think this is the perfect workout to push yourself out of that cozy comfort zone. You can download the full Speed Trainer workout video package, the tabs, guitar profiles, backing tracks, and video play-alongs on patreon.com/Bernd. With these files I made especially for you, you can finally push your speed in a really rewarding and fun way. Now before you go and practice, let's discuss today's final topic, technique. So the last thing you definitely have to keep in mind with all of this is your technique. Great and economic technique will make it much easier for you to build speed, so you definitely want to keep a close eye on both hands in your practice routine. Let's quickly check out the intro clip once again. I played 16th notes at 230 beats per minute in that one. As we discussed in the Economy of Motion episode last month, you don't need to push extremely hard to play fast. You also risk getting injuries like tendonitis if you push too hard, and it usually doesn't sound too great. Here's a quick technique checklist for you so that you get the best results out of your next practice session with the files I made for you on Patreon. Make sure to work with the tip of your pick. This will make string transitions and building speed much easier for you. I personally like to go with small jazz-free picks since they give me the most amount of control. Please try to relax your arms and hands, even when you play very fast. Please make sure to stop if you feel any pain or a weird burning sensation. You don't need your full arm muscles to play like this, and I'm not cramping up at these tempos. Keep your fretting hand fingers as close to the fretboard as possible. The bigger their movement is, the harder it will be to play fast. If they remain close to the fretboard, they don't have to move back and forth constantly, and this economy of motion really helps with building speed as well. Make sure not to lock up your wrist completely when you're playing fast, stay loose and avoid a full arm motion. I'm not only using my wrist at these fast tempos, as you can see, I'm also pushing a bit with my arm, but I never lock up my wrist and just work with a complete elbow or full arm motion. That way I would lose control over the string transitions, and it's hard to avoid unwanted noise when you're playing like that. So make sure to download all of your practice files on patreon.com/Bernd right now to start working on this together with me. So when you work on this, please make sure to also practice with those fast play-alongs I recorded for you to exit your comfort zone. It's perfectly fine to play a bit sloppy in the beginning. Just make sure to challenge yourself and hit me up on Patreon if you have any questions about it. We have around 3,000 members in our awesome shred guitar community over there already, and this is all about becoming a better player every single week. Let's work on our fretting hand technique today. I want to show you 6 exercises today that will get your left hand, in my case, into great shape by eliminating and correcting common problems, bad habits and technique mistakes. It will only take around 10 minutes of your time, and the effects on your guitar playing and technique will be huge if you complete today's video. The following exercises will make it possible for you to play awesome legato licks with hammer-ons and pull-offs like that. And an efficient fretting hand technique will make it possible for you to play songs and guitar solos that you only dreamed about playing so far. Let's get to work. The first really big and common mistake I'd like to address today is not working on all fingers equally. Obviously, we all have stronger and weaker fingers, and I really wish that working with my pinky finger would feel exactly the same way like playing with my index finger. So it's really important not to neglect certain fingers or finger combinations by always working with the same 2 or 3 exercises in every routine. Here's a really helpful workout with a twist that challenges all of your fingers. Quick side note before we get to the really important twist with this exercise. I recorded a 15-minute legato play-along video workout for patreon.com/Bernd, including scrolling tabs, guitar profiles, audio backing tracks and PDF tabs. Just 1 week of practicing this extremely effective workout together with me will have huge effects on your technique already. So back to the first exercise. The most important and often overlooked detail of this exercise is that I'm lifting the first finger just a little bit when I don't have to use it. So my index finger is not fretting A on the 5th fret on the low E string for the entire duration of the workout. This is a very common bad habit that I've encountered with my own playing and with a lot of my students as well. Really pressing down with your index finger or with your middle finger when you don't actually need them at the moment for your hammer-ons and pull-offs results in a very stiff and not exactly economic motion. So this really helpful first workout will train all of your fingers if you make sure to make each note audible and equal in dynamics. The second big issue and frustration I keep hearing about is generating unwanted noise by touching surrounding strings with your fingers while you're playing. Of course, this is especially problematic when you're playing with distortion. As you could see and hear, that sounds pretty bad, and a big uncontrolled motion like that stands in the way of getting that super clean, fast and well-defined sound that we're all after. So let's take the previous exercise now and place it on the G string. Now you have 2 strings surrounding the one that you want to play on, and you don't want to touch them or make them ring in any way. So with this exercise, I want to make sure that you're not just practicing your hammer-ons and pull-offs on the lowest or the highest string. As soon as you work with a sandwiched string, so to say, it will become much more challenging, but you will need this extremely often. Let's move to topic number 3. Another bad habit that I'm also guilty of is not working on transitions between shapes and positions that much. When we think of finger exercises, we mostly have something like that in mind. So these classic workouts that only focus on a very specific section on the fretboard are very helpful, of course, especially when you're starting out, working on your technique. But as soon as things get more practical, you will have to switch between different scale or arpeggio shapes to build interesting licks. And of course, you don't want the listener to hear whenever you're switching between different positions. This is an example of how fluid transitions can really improve your sound. With this one I paid close attention to connecting the shapes and making it sound as fluid as possible. Here's an exercise for you that's not only extremely fun to play, it will also help you with introducing more connected legato lines into your playing. So unlike the very popular exercises that only focus on one position, you're switching between 2 shapes right here. Please focus on really connecting those two fingerings when you work on this. It shouldn't sound like playing two separate shapes at all. This will greatly benefit your sound and phrasing. We barely scratched the surface. The next topics are the most important ones on this list. And it makes me really sad that you constantly keep missing exercises like this because you're not subscribed to this channel. Only around 25% of you are real members of this guitar community that get the maximum results by staying up to date. So make sure to join this awesome practice environment today by subscribing. The next extremely important topic concerns the area of your fingertips that you are using when you are playing, with special focus on hammer-ons and pull-offs. You actually don't want to work with the fleshy parts of your fingertips right here. It will be much easier if the string comes in contact with the area close to your fingernails. Not only will it be easier for you to avoid touching other strings that way, it will also be easier to build speed and a super clean technique. Here's a great and quite challenging exercise for that based around the B and E strings. As you can see, it's very beneficial for my control, sound and string transitions to work with the described area of my fingertips. So once again, I'm not using that kind of flashy part of my fingertips right here. It's much easier and more efficient if the string comes in contact with the area close to my fingernails. Of course, it does take a while to adapt this with your playing, but please make sure to include that in your practice plan and to experiment with this, especially if you're guilty of the flat fingers problem that we discussed in an earlier video. The next and probably most important topic of this list is about moving your wrist when you're playing and about the angle of your wrist in general. This becomes a big factor as soon as you start to play more complicated lines across all 6 strings, like with this full legato scale exercise. Please pay close attention to my fretting hand right here. I don't change the angle of my wrist at all when I'm playing across all the different strings, and I maintain the same position for the entire scale. I'm basically just moving my hand up or down. So it doesn't look like this, for example. It's really hard to get consistent and clean results out of a technique that looks like this, and speeding up this kind of motion feels almost impossible. So if your wrist angle is constantly changing when you're playing like that, you will get very inconsistent results. Aside from touching other strings that you actually don't want to play on with a big motion like that, your playing will work and sound relatively good sometimes if the angle somehow matches what you're doing, and you won't really be able to figure out why you're struggling with certain lines sometimes and while it works other times, so very inconsistent results. So one of my biggest tips that made a huge difference with my own playing is minimizing hand movement when you're playing exercises like that. So please focus on keeping the same wrist angle with the following workouts and don't adjust the angle with every single string transition. Here are the next 2 levels of this exercise that are featured in the full Patreon video play along workout. For today's last and really important topic, I'd like to talk a bit about the transition to a more practical sound and playing style. So this is not that much about technique mistakes or bad habits, it's a bit more about practice mistakes. So I think it's a great idea to also include challenging, practical and creative sounding licks in your practice routine when you work on your fretting hand technique. This will make you sound less like you're practicing your workouts as soon as you start improvising with legato lines over backing tracks. So by working with actual licks at the end of your practice routine, while still keeping a close eye on your technique of course, you will slowly unlock many amazing creative possibilities with your playing as well. So now that you know about all these very common fretting hand technique mistakes and bad habits, it's time to actually practice today's workout so that you get the most amount of progress out of your daily routine. Make sure to download all of your files for today's video on patreon.com/Bernd, including the really awesome 15-minute legato video play along workout, and start practicing all of these really important exercises together with me from now on in your practice routine. If you're still not a real part of our guitar community here on YouTube, make sure to join us right now by subscribing to help us with reaching our community goal of 1 million subscribers.
In this video I want to show you the exact exercise that helped me the most with my biggest picking problems and frustrations, and I'm quite sure that it will do the exact same thing for you too. As some of you guys might know by now, I'm really into all the classic 3-note per string shredding. I really like the sound of that, so that has always been a big part of my practice plan for over 10 years now. But when I started getting really into alternate picking in the beginning, I made a huge mistake with my mindset. I thought that by practicing fast and advanced alternate picking licks like the one I just played for you, my overall alternate picking technique will get better and better every single day. But as you probably know, there are significant changes in the motion and technique itself when it comes to different tempos. So playing 16th notes at mid tempos at 120 or 130 beats per minute, for example, was a real challenge for me because I never really worked on that. It was also really difficult for me to play those cool arpeggiated 2-note per string licks like the one I just played for you. I was pretty much always working on 3-note per string patterns or sweep picking sections because I associated that 2-note per string approach with basic pentatonic licks. But in my professional studio and live career I had to play and learn more and more stuff that involved picking like that, so it was time to do something about it. So this is the exact exercise I want you to work on religiously if you have any troubles with alternate picking at those mid tempos. As always, you can find the tabs, guitar profiles and special practice backing tracks in different tempos for this exercise on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Bernd. I also help with creating custom practice plans for all my members, and gold members get to vote on the lesson topics for this channel each month. So if you check that exercise out for the first time, it might not look too intimidating, especially compared to a lot of the other crazy stuff we looked at so far on here. But once you actually try it yourself, you will see that your right hand has to work very hard in the beginning to get that consistent alternate picking at this tempo, and of course it also has to deal with clean string transitioning for those 2-note per string arpeggio shapes. I can really feel that in my right hand already, and it's also a great warm-up exercise for your practice routine. So before we talk about the biggest takeaways concerning technique with this exercise, let's discuss the shapes a bit. As always, I put the shapes and notes on the other screen. Let's go through them real quick. You can also download the tabs and guitar profiles on Patreon if you want to learn this in detail. So essentially I'm just playing the 4-note chords on every scale degree of the C minor scale here. So a C minor 7th chord on the first scale degree, then I move to a D minor 7 flat 5 chord on the second scale degree, E flat major 7th chord for the F minor 7th chord. So here's the most important thing concerning the picking for this exercise. In order to not get stuck between the strings after you perform each down and up stroke on every string, you need to play with an angle like that and not with an angle like that. Because watch what happens when I use this angle. That was very hard to do, and as you could see, my right hand had to jump over the strings all the time, and it just really doesn't feel right when I play this way. But when I turn my pick in that direction and you just play downstroke, upstroke on one string, you can see that with this movement the pick is immediately moving away from the strings and it's not locked in between the E and A string in that case. It is completely free and in a perfect position to perform the next down and upstroke on the next string. So here's a quick comparison of those two angles. Make sure to watch my right hand. I'm starting with the bad angle and then I'm moving to the perfect angle for this exercise. That was very hard to do once again. I had to jump a lot between the different strings in order to not get stuck between them. But now when I turn my pick in that direction for this exercise, much better and it actually comes very natural. So if you're sitting with a guitar in front of your computer or your phone right now, please try that out immediately and feel the difference. The next very important thing is that my hand is very relaxed when I'm playing this exercise. I absolutely can't perform this one in a nice way if I'm putting too much attack or tension in my picking hand. As you can hear, that turns into a complete mess really quick. You can hear that I'm touching multiple strings when I'm performing the exercise and it sounds absolutely terrible. But when I focus on staying relaxed with my picking hand, it's much easier to get that constant motion of 2 notes per string going. So that is another extremely helpful aspect of this exercise that I really love. I have to stay relaxed with my picking hand or else I can't perform the lick correctly. And the last thing I want you to focus on before you get to practicing this is the right-left hand technique. When you developed a left hand angle like that over the years, you will have a really hard time with this exercise because it will result in overlapping notes constantly. You will miss a couple of notes because you can't really switch between the positions in an efficient way. And you want those notes to be separated with the exercise. That's the most important factor that makes it sound so nice. So please focus on using an angle like that for this exercise and not like that or even like that. And you also want that nice curl with your fingers. So don't use this kind of flat angle that I often see, because you're essentially blocking the next string when you're playing that way, and it will be very difficult to play nice arpeggio shapes in the future. So that is another very important factor, and it's also a great independence exercise for your fingers. Since you're just playing 1 note per string, essentially with your left hand, you're playing 2 strokes with your right hand, but it's just 1 note with your left hand for each string, so it's a nice independence exercise and every single finger has to work individually. So I really hope that you will work on this exercise every day from now. It was a real game changer for me and I'm very happy to pass it on to you. If you want to make the most progress with your alternate picking technique, make sure to download the practice backing tracks that I uploaded on Patreon for this exercise. By playing to them, you always have a rhythmic and melodic reference, so you can see if you're doing the exercise correctly, and you can also structure your practice plan a little bit better. Alright my friend, you made it all the way until the end of this video. I'm very proud of you for completing it. Now is the perfect time to actually join my Guitar Academy on patreon.com/burnt with the link in the description to get all your practice files for this video. You also get access to my premium guitar courses over there and even some personal coaching if you'd like my personal input on your technique and progress. So what are you waiting for? Click the link down below. I'm waiting for you inside my online Guitar Academy on Patreon. See you there. Have an awesome day.